Hello and welcome to Newswire. I'm Jawad Tehami. As the COVID-19 pandemic claims more and more lives, infecting thousands of people worldwide, fears of losing the battle are also increasing. So far, the deadly virus has killed over 82,000 people and infected over 1.4 million people across the world. U.S. top medical expert Dr. Anthony Fauci has warned that life may never get back to normal as it was before the pandemic struck. However, he says that a showstopper could only be an effective vaccine. Now, over 160 world leaders have urged the 20 major economies to approve $8 billion in emergency global health funding. The fund is actually needed to hasten the search for the COVID-19 vaccine to prevent a second wave of the pandemic. The scientists in many countries around the world are working at a breakneck speed to get an effective vaccine against COVID-19. There are at least 42 other potential coronavirus vaccines in the pre-clinical trial stage around the world. To talk about the efforts which the governments and the scientific community around the world are putting in to beat the pace of the rapidly spreading coronavirus and make an effective vaccine, we are joined today at a Newswire by Dr. Patrick Tang, who is the Division Chief of Pathology Sciences at Sidra Medicine, joining us from Doha, and Professor Steve Keen, economist, joining us from Thailand. Thank you for your time at Newswire. I'll start the discussion with you, Dr. Tang. Tell us a little bit about the efforts which are being put by the governments and especially the scientific community at this point in time to win the battle against this deadly virus.
Well, right now there's a large number of vaccines being developed in many countries around the world. And I think that's very important because when we develop vaccines, we never know which one is going to be successful, which one is going to be efficacious. So it's important that there's many different vaccine candidates being trialed. And some of them have now gone on to animal trials, and one of them has even gone on to start human trials very soon.
Okay, the first clinical trial of a particular vaccine was done by the US in mid-March. Now the health experts have been saying that even if the research goes well, a vaccine would not be available for widespread use for at least 12 to 18 months. Tell us how much time it normally takes for a vaccine to be validated for the widespread use.
So the timelines that you put forward are very accurate. It does take a minimum of 12 to 18 months to get a vaccine out. Typically, most vaccine candidates fail during the initial trial, so they never make it to the very end. So often vaccines take many years to come to fruition so that they can be distributed to the public. So this is a very accelerated process for making a vaccine for COVID-19.
So, Dr. Tang, usually read in certain reports that usually it takes around 10 to 15 years for a vaccine to be validated and used for the wider public. Is that correct?
Yeah, every vaccine is going to be different. Some take longer to develop, some take a shorter time to develop, but definitely it's in the order of magnitude of years, not in the order of magnitude of months.
Okay, Dr. Tang, I'll come to you with what exactly if a certain vaccine is developed and how can it actually be used all around the globe? And already we have discussed how much time it could possibly take for a vaccine to be prepared against COVID-19. I'll go with the economic aspect of developing a certain vaccine and the distribution around the globe to Professor Keen. How much money do you think is required for such an effort on such a large scale for the research and the development of such a vaccine?
Well, it's more the physical effort that's necessary, because I think one thing this crisis is teaching us is the whole focus on do we have the money to pay for something is stupid. We should have allocated money for research into means to fight a pandemic from as long ago as 25 years ago, when the first warning was made that one was inevitable by Laurie Garrett in her book, The Coming Plague. The real problem is the sheer physical resources necessary. And we're talking about needing to vaccinate something of the order of 2 to 4 billion people. That's an enormous number of physical vaccine elements, physical vaccine doses. It's gearing up for that level of production that is necessary. And given the threat this poses both to human health and to this viability of our economic system, we simply have to allocate whatever money is necessary.
So, Professor Keen, as 106 world leaders have urged 20 top economies of the world to inject at least $8 billion in emergency health fund, do you think that amount of money is sufficient at this point in time to carry out such a large-scale work to prepare an effective vaccine for COVID-19?
No, absolutely not. I'm not an expert in development of vaccines, obviously, but $8 billion sounds like small change in this situation. We're talking about losing trillions of dollars of GDP through this virus. By the way, it's forcing the shutdown of the economy. And it's time we stopped thinking about this in market terms and simply thought about it in terms of mobilising the physical resources that are necessary. I don't see how $8 billion is anything like a sufficient sum to enable the range of experiments to be undertaken and the range of attempts to build at least one vaccine which can be rolled out, as my colleague says, in the order of months rather than the usual order of years. We simply can't afford to wait years for this to be done.
Professor Keen, already G20 had pledged to around $5 trillion into the world economy. Do you think a major chunk, more than $8 billion, should be allocated out of that particular fund which has been pledged by G20 for emergency health fund?
Yeah, $8 billion is, I don't even know if it's a day's GDP. It wouldn't be a day's GDP in America. Those are trivial sums. This shows the inability of our political leaders to think about the world as a complex system and to realise what happens when an exponential threat strikes you. Just to give some background here, at the current rate of growth of infections, unless something is done to slow down the level, we will go from 1.5 million infections today to 500 million infections by the end of May. That's 8 weeks away, less than 8 weeks. So you have to think about this as an exponential crisis, and you do not pinch the pennies when you're trying to fight this. You throw everything you can at it. 8 billion still sounds like trivia, like thinking like accountants trying to balance the books rather than world leaders trying to stop a global crisis.
Okay. Dr. Tang, Australia's science agency has announced that it has begun trials on ferrets and is the first in the world to confirm that ferrets react to COVID-19 virus. They say there are 2 potential vaccines which are being researched upon. Now, when they confirm that ferrets react to the version of potential vaccine, what does that actually indicate?
So often in vaccine trials, they try the vaccines first on an animal model, in this case, the ferret. And if it works there, then they start to test it on humans. So they would first, in a phase 1 trial, would test it on healthy volunteers to make sure the vaccine's safe. And if it's safe, they go on to do what we call phase 2 trials, where they do hundreds of people in a heavily affected area and see if the vaccine makes a difference at preventing infection. And then if that's successful, it goes to the 3rd phase of the clinical trials, where thousands of people are recruited to see if the vaccine is efficacious in a larger number of people. And then after that point, then we can start scaling up production and thinking about all those other important things, like how do we distribute it and other things like that are going to be very crucial after we actually have a successful vaccine.
Dr. Tang, do you think once developed and a certain vaccine which has gone through all these steps of different trials, do you think one certain vaccine could provide a guard for the humanity at large for almost over 3 or 4 billion people in the world?
It's quite possible that we need more than one vaccine because we don't know which one of these vaccines are currently in trials are going to be successful. It's very hard to predict, no matter how hopeful we are for each vaccine, whether it's actually going to work when we try it out in real people. So we have to wait and give it time to find out what the results are from all of these trials.
So, Dr. Tang, does it ever happen that once vaccine is developed and once it is used on the general public, there happen to be certain side effects of a certain vaccine in a certain population of a certain area?
Can have side effects, as with any other drug that we give to people. They can have side effects in certain small numbers of people, usually. If it had side effects in a large number of people, then obviously that vaccine would not be allowed to be given to the public. So there's many safety checks that we have during the development and testing pipeline to prevent these kinds of things from happening.
So, Dr. Tang, how much usually does it take in terms of money for a certain vaccine to be found and then distributed all across the globe on such a larger scale?
So it would be typical to see vaccines requiring hundreds of millions to billions of dollars to get it to the safety level that we need for something as important as this. So I think, again, from my colleague that spoke before, this is not the time to be looking at how much money is required, but we pretty much, whatever is required needs to be spent. We can't be doing accounting at this time.
Dr. Tang, very quickly, one last question from you. Once we are able to develop a certain vaccine against COVID-19, is it a possibility in future that that particular virus mutates and becomes immune to that particular vaccine? Would there be a requirement of a new vaccine then from there on?
Course of an outbreak, viruses don't tend to change that much that our drugs or vaccines will stop working against it, especially for viruses like this, like a coronavirus. For something like an influenza virus, which mutates in a very different way than coronavirus, then that is possible. From year to year, we see that influenza viruses can change very dramatically, but that's not true for this particular coronavirus. The way it mutates is a different mechanism. It would have to be a new virus that comes out, a new coronavirus that would make this vaccine not efficacious.
Dr. Tang, I'll come to you with a point. There are certain medicines, until unless vaccine is not found and it's not prepared, and it is not validated, there are certain remedies which are being spoken about around the world. For example, a US president gave certain medicines a voice, and then we talk about a Japanese prime minister. I'll come to that point. I'll go to Professor Akin. Once developed, how is it made available around the world? Do the governments have to pay for it, or will it be distributed around the world on humanitarian grounds, free of cost?
Well, it has to be distributed free. There's absolutely no point in telling people they have to pay money for this. But just to give you a rough ballpark of what it might cost, this is totally back of the envelope thinking. If we have 7.5 billion people on this planet. If we estimate that something like 5 billion of them have to be vaccinated, it wouldn't be beyond the realms of reality to imagine that it would cost, in terms of delivery and production and distribution, $100 per copy. That's $500 billion. And that's after the vaccine is developed and manufactured. So something like $500 billion has to be spent. And if you charge people money for it, then poor people won't be able to do it. The virus will then get a foothold in poor people and come back and infect everybody else again. It simply has to be done for free. The entire concept of thinking about this in a market economy way will let the virus win and we lose. This has to be a all of humanity effort.
Dr. Tang, I'll come back to you. There is one medicine which the Japanese Prime Minister has mentioned, and he has said that this particular medicine has actually given very positive results against COVID-19 while the patients were being treated in Japan. If I can correctly pronounce it, it is Evigan, if you know about this one. And he has also said this particular medicine had yielded very positive results, and the mortality rate in Ebola hit Guinea reduced from 30% to 15%. What do you have to say about it?
Currently, there is no efficacious drug for treatment of, specifically for the treatment of COVID-19 yet. All of the evidence that's out there is still very preliminary. they're not strong enough that we can advocate for any one treatment. So it's very important that the clinical trials keep going on and that we wait for the results of the clinical trials when we have enough numbers to really show whether these drugs are working or whether they're even causing harm. So if we act on these very small trials or very uncontrolled trials, we could potentially harm people.
There have been some initial findings, as US President also alluded to a couple of weeks back, that hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine can provide a relief, and it has also yielded positive results. So what's your analysis on this? As you have just mentioned that there is no confirmed medicine which could be used against COVID-19, but that there are reports that there's certain medicine like this one, which I have mentioned, which was alluded to by President Trump, they have yielded positive results.
Again, hydroxychloroquine the evidence for that is still very weak. It's very what we call anecdotal. So it's only been tried on small numbers of patients, and the results are not strong enough that we could advocate it for treating people at this point. I think these comments are very preliminary, and we can't be relying on politicians to give out healthcare advice.
Dr. Tang, I'll come to you with one certain therapy that is also being talked about. For now, we are joined by Mr. Hamid, Reza, Gholamzadeh, Analyst, joining us from Tehran. Thank you at Newswire. First of all, tell us, what is the situation in Iran? How is Iran coping up with the COVID-19 pandemic as of today?
Thank you very much for having me. Actually, we had, unfortunately, passed the 4,000 death toll from the COVID-19 virus. And however, we have also some good, about 30,000 people have recovered from the disease. But it is too much. The 4,000 casualties is too much, I expect. And but the point is that the main problem and the main thing that is hindering the efforts by Iran is the sanctions that is unilaterally and illegally imposed against Iran by the United States. And unfortunately, no other world powers, neither Europeans, no other countries, neither the United Nations are taking serious measures to actually stop these sanctions, which are against the international law, against the resolution of the United Nations Security Council. So what we are handling right now, what we are dealing with now, is that we have almost controlled the disease, the level of the disease and the death toll and everything is almost, let's say, understandable, something based on the curve that is expected to be. And we are dealing with that almost well. But if we didn't have the sanctions, that could be much better. We could have a much lower death toll and dead people from this. We could handle the disease better by having more test kits and testing people, finding those asymptomatic disease patients easier, and we could control it better in order not to have further casualties and further people
Mr.
being
Gholamzadeh, you have just already mentioned today we are talking in specific about the possibility of getting an effective vaccine against COVID-19. As you have mentioned that over 30,000 people in Iran have recovered from COVID-19. Was it due to basically the preventive measures, or were there certain specific medicines which were used by medical practitioners over there?
We cannot say that there is a certain medicine for that. There is no, let's say, scientific proof or anything. Iran has been trying a couple of ones. With the researchers and all the scientists here in Iran are working round the clock to try to find the cure. However, they are trying some things. We have had a couple of ones. Of course, not what President Trump has introduced to the world, and he has some shares.
Is there any research and development going on in Iran regarding finding out an effective vaccine against COVID-19?
Both vaccine and the cure are being researched in Iran. There are actually two lines of work here in Iran, two lines of research. One is the scientific one based on the modern sciences and the medicine and such things. One is based on the, let's say, traditional and ancient medicine that we have had through history and for, let's say, over 1,000 years. So they are both working to that. In some points, they have come together to join hands to try to reach a better solution, to give hand to, maybe they can find a better thing. They are trying some things. What I've heard and read on the news.
The second point,
are a couple of ones
Mr. Gholamzadeh, you have mentioned a very interesting point. The research and the development is going simultaneously on two parallel lines. One on the scientific, the contemporary scientific lines, and the other one is the ancient cure of the diseases. Is there any specific thing which has been shared with the public on these lines, the ancient cure of the diseases in Iran?
The point is that there are some controversy over the traditional and ancient medicine. So some people prefer to trust only on the science, modern science, I mean, and they are not they're hesitant actually to accept the traditional one. So they are working actually very, let's say, quietly and not very publicly. However, when they achieve something, when they find something that could be a cure and has had some, for
there
example,
are certain people who are working, but not that publicly about the ancient cure of the medicine. Obviously, most of the people, as you say, prefer to have the contemporary scientific cure of any certain disease. Dr. Tang, it's really an interesting thing that a country is working on two parallel lines to find the cure of COVID-19. When we talk about some older therapies, one is the plasma therapy or the plasma procedure. The plasma from a recovered patient is usually said to be injected into the bloodstream of an infected person, and he can get the recovery. How do you think is the efficacy of this method?
So the use of immune plasma from people that have recovered from serious infections has been tried in other serious outbreaks as well, too. Like for SARS, that was also tried. There is some efficacy for some patients, but it's not a universal treatment for all people. So it doesn't always work for all cases.
Dr. Tang, here is a supposition. Let's suppose if this virus is new to us, for the contemporary scientific community, that's why it is given the name of novel coronavirus. Is there any possibility that a similar sort of virus might have occurred in history, and the scientific community might have not gone through the entire literature that such type of virus could have very simpler solution? Rather, we are looking for a very difficult or a complex solution at this point in time.
So I think we are already using very simple solutions to try to combat this virus, which is using methods like quarantine and isolation, techniques that go back centuries, because we don't have...
Perhaps the scientific community is not into ancient remedies or the cures of certain diseases, perhaps because the ancient cures and that method has been put on a backbench.
Well, I think it's always easy to go back and say that there might be natural cures for every disease out there. But the evidence from before wasn't held to the same standards that we have now, where a lot of diseases and other things like that get better on their own, no matter what kind of medicine you gave them. So people in the past might have thought a traditional medicine worked, but if you really do a randomized controlled trial, often these things don't pan out. So I think if things were held to the same standard that we have now, many traditional medicine might not work, but they might have appeared to work to the people that tried them out hundreds or thousands of years ago.
Okay, Dr. Tang, unless an effective vaccine is not found and get validation, so is there any fear of a second wave of infection? And until then, what is exactly that period could be from 12 months to 18 months. In this time span, what are the people around the world are supposed to do to protect themselves against this disease?
So with all of the severe restrictions that we have right now, we should expect the outbreak to go down a little bit, and especially with the coming of summer in the northern hemisphere, we might see a decline in the rates of infection over the next few months. But it's quite likely that it will come back when the fall and winter hits, because we won't have effective drugs and we won't have a vaccine by that time. So it's quite likely that there'll be another season of this virus before we have something like a vaccine.
So Dr. Tang, very briefly and quickly, as we are short of time, can there be a possibility of herd immunity once, until unless the effective vaccine is not found?
Yes, definitely. If enough people get infected, you would have herd immunity, but there would be a high toll in the healthcare system because many of those people are going to die. Many of them are going to have severe infections that are going to overwhelm the healthcare system. So I think it's very important that if we are trying to achieve herd immunity, in theory, it's going to be very difficult to do it in a way that doesn't severely impact our healthcare system.
Dr. Patrick Tang, Analyst and the Division Chief of Pathology Sciences at Siddha Medicine, joining us from Doha. Thank you for your time at Newswire. And Mr. Hamid, Gholamzadeh, Analyst, joining us from Tehran. Thanks for your time at Newswire as well. With this, we come to the end of the first segment of the show. After a short break, we'll discuss the plight of Kashmiri detainees in Indian prisons amid the COVID-19 pandemic. For that, stay tuned. Welcome back to Newswire. I'm Jawad Tehami. Since 5th of August, Kashmiris in the Indian occupied valley have been under a curfew and complete communication clampdown. Owing to the unilateral actions by BJP-led government in India, innocent Kashmiris had been dealing with hunger, bullets and detentions. As thousands of Kashmiris are languishing in Indian jails, COVID-19 threat has added to their miseries. The UN has urged India to closely monitor the plight of detainees in the occupied valley as pandemic spreads across the world. 6 international human rights organizations have called on Indian government to free detained Kashmiris. UN Human Rights Chief has called on the international community to protect prisoners from the pandemic by releasing vulnerable ones. Contrarily, Indian high-handedness in the occupied valley continues unabated as it has introduced a new law aiming at changing the demography of the region, which is against the 4th Geneva Convention and the UN Security Council resolutions. Pakistan has raised alarm against Indian atrocities and inhumane treatment of the residents in the valley. To talk more about the plight of the Kashmiris, particularly the detainees amid the COVID-19 pandemic, we are joined today by Mr. Gowhar Geelani, analyst from Srinagar, and Mr. Syed Manzoor Shah, analyst and member of the All-Party Hurriyat Conference from Islamabad. Thank you, both of you gentlemen, for your time. I'll start the discussion with you, Mr. Geelani. Tell us something about the current situation on the ground. As we know, since August the 5th, owing to the communication clampdown, nothing clear is coming out of the occupied valley.
Thank you very much for having me. As you rightly pointed out, that since August 5, the unprecedented, suspension of internet services, which continued for over 7 months, and now they have reduced it to 2G service. To even during a pandemic, when people are sitting at homes and they need to watch the videos by WHO to kill time, but they still have now extended the ban for the 5th time until 15th April, and they are doing a review after every 2 weeks. So, but what has been more threatening is even when the world is battling this COVID pandemic, the Indian government, Ministry of Home Affairs, came up with a new domicile law, which actually threatens the very demographics and the existence of the native Kashmiris and the permanent residents of Jammu and Kashmir. And it's for the first time that people in Jammu have also raised alarm and raised their voice against the new domicile order. And then they tweaked it a little bit, but it still, allows Indian citizens to get domicile certificates and then compete for jobs and land and buy property. So it is a direct attack which people perceive on the very existence of Kashmiris, and the dominant perception is that the RSS and the BJP are going ahead with their political Hindutva project to change the demography in Jammu and Kashmir. And one more thing about the aged and caged of Kashmiris, we have right now 76-year-old president of the Jammu and Kashmir High Court Bar Association, who has an impeccable record in, as a lawyer, who is languishing in an Indian jail since last 8 months, and he's surviving on a lone kidney. He's a heart patient and he has had multiple surgeries. So another 73-year-old Ghulam Hubbi, Dr. Hubbi, he also, is languishing in jails. And there are many, many dozens more who are like about 70-year-old. They have been they have been shifted to outside jails in outside Kashmir. And according to Ministry of Home Affairs figures, they themselves admitted that they arrested 7,357 Kashmiris and put them under preventive detention and slapped stringent draconian Public Safety Act against many of them. And then they also released some of them. But still, according to human rights organizations, there are more than 1,000 Kashmiris languishing in various parts of various Indian jails.
Okay, Mr. Geelani, I'll come to you with this particular point that how many people are languishing in different Indian jails, particularly Kashmiris, and some of them you mentioned have ages closer to 70 who are actually languishing in Indian jails from last 8 months since the revocation of Article 370. Talking about the threat of COVID-19 in Kashmir, given that Indian government seems unable to control the situation within India, how serious is the threat that the Kashmiris are feeling at this moment of this COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, the fundamental problem is that there is no local government in place. The entire control it lies with the Indian Army and the administrators who have been parachuted from outside. And it is being run. It's like that book that Mridu Rai wrote, which is like Hindu rulers and Muslim subjects. So right now the LG, Lieutenant Governor, is also from outside. The Divisional Commissioner Kashmir, he is also from Maharashtra, the Indian state of Maharashtra. So the entire administration, the top police force, every single officer is from India. And mostly they are non-Kashmiris and also non-Muslims. So everything is under their control. The media, there's a complete gag on the local media to report about any loopholes in the administration while dealing with the pandemic. So the entire information, gatekeeping is done by the information department through these. It's basically police is controlling everything and these administrators. So there's a lot of things which we don't know. We have had in a small place like Kashmir 3 deaths because of alleged medical negligence, and there are around 150 cases right now, over 100 mostly in the Kashmir Valley and some in Jammu. But it is the biggest challenge remains that how information is controlled and how gatekeeping is done by these administrators and the native informants who people refer to as
Manzoor
native informants.
As Mr. Geelani has just mentioned that there are over 150 COVID-19 cases in the occupied valley. What are the preparations do you think have been done in order to combat this crisis? Are there certain difficulties which are being faced by the medical staff in the hospitals? Are there enough testing facilities in the occupied valley?
I have been talking to the district Kapwara Mr. Masood, and he told me there is no arrangement of the protective kits being issued to the paramedics or the doctors. And District Kapwara has no facility, as well as Baramulla district has not seen yet any these facilities, combat facilities to the COVID-19. While they have found 6 cases there in Kapwara and 9 cases they have found in Baramulla district. And same is the situation in the whole valley of the Kashmir and as well as in Jammu. they have not been prepared for the combat of the COVID-19, and there generally remains no access to the doctors and the paramedics and treatment facilities to the people due to the COVID-19 restrictions, and before it was already in place for last 8 months. Last 8 months, Kashmiris have been facing the restrictions, and those restrictions have been multiplied now. And under that grab, they have been imposing the law of the state subject change, law of the domicile, and other 138 laws from India have been imposed in Kashmir.
So, Mr. Manzoor Shah, how many Kashmiris are detained by the Indian forces since August the 5th after revocation of Article 370? And what specific hardships are they going through, especially when the international bodies have raised alarm that the deadly virus can spread at a very rapid pace in the prisons across the world?
Yes, yes. Well, when on 5th August 2019, last year, the revocation of the Article 370 and 35A and the bifurcation of the state of Jammu and Kashmir was imposed, then they had arrested 60,000 people and documented arrested people were 40,000. And now 13,000 and more than 13,000 people are still languishing in different jails of India, and particularly in the outside state, in the Maharashtra, in UP, in Gujarat, in Haryana, in Tihar jail of Jammu, more than 13,000 people are still languishing in jails. And hardships they are facing here, that the jail authorities consider them as criminals, and they are mixing them with the thieves, with the killers, with the other type of the moral convicts, and they have no facilities as have been guaranteed in the human rights
there are no facilities as has been guaranteed to the human rights values. Now, talking about certain statistics, Mr. Geelani, with an occupancy rate of over 117%, precarious hygienic conditions and inadequate health services are there in the overcrowded Indian prisons, and which constitute a perfect environment for the spread of COVID-19. Do you agree?
See, I just wanted to refer to the earlier point first, and then I will come to this question as well. As far as Kashmir is concerned, the population in the Kashmir Valley, according to the 2011 census, now we have to also add the decadal growth, which is around 8 million plus 80 lakh people. And we have 3 big hospitals in the Kashmir Valley, Sher Kashmir Institute of Medical Science and SMHS, and 1 JLNM, where for a population of about 80 lakh souls, we have 97 ventilators. 97 ventilators for a population of 80 lakh. And now they are claiming that they have brought some, 200 more ventilators. But the situation, as you also understand, that globally the pandemic has taken a huge toll on, even the developed world, developed countries. And it's a serious problem. But the problem here is that there is no openness, as I earlier alluded to, because there is no public government, there is no public representative. It's all controlled by the police and administration, who are mostly from outside, and they're non-Kashmiris. So there's lack of access to the right information because the gatekeeping is so very brutal. And second point, with regards to the
figure that you have given, Mr. Geelani, is really alarming, that only 97 ventilators are there for such a huge population in the occupied valley. And hopefully the international community, which has been raising alarms regarding the detainees which are languishing in different jails across the world, the Indian government thinks on serious lines to free them, especially those who are vulnerable. With this, we come to the end of today's Newswire. Mr. Gowhar Geelani, analyst, joining us from Srinagar, thank you for your time. And Mr. Syed Manzoor Shah, analyst and member of All Parties Hurriyat Conference, joining us from Islamabad. With more in-depth analysis on major happening from around the globe. We'll be back with you on Monday. Till then, take good care of yourselves.